So I heard about this grant for creative arts and research projects at school, and I wanted to talk to you, my dad, and maybe a couple of my aunts and uncles about your service in the Second World War. I also wanted to get some more information about that letter you sent me when I was a little kid. It was very brief, and I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about your story.
Do I have to keep it clean?
Not if you don't want to.
No.
The following is the beginning of that letter, which neither of us have read in 16 years.
Friday, July 19th, 1996. Dear Graham, I'm very sorry that I forgot to send you the pictures of when I was a soldier. I thank you for reminding me.
Well, the thing that that became a personal connection with me is that every time I asked Grandpa about anything about the war, he wouldn't talk about it.
We didn't talk about that. I didn't have those conversations with Dad about him being a veteran or being in the war.
As a kid, you didn't really get a feeling of the seriousness of it, or what he really went through, the battles. You never spoke about the fighting, but you never really heard Dad talk about what he went through, these experiences as a young man. You know, you start to think, well, okay, yeah, no, all he ever talked about was the fun time, the camaraderie. He didn't really talk about the killing, but you realize that in a war such as that, he saw an awful lot of action and had to do things that were a result of war that he, as a civilized person, he wouldn't think of doing otherwise.
My grandfather's journey to Europe began on September 2nd, 1939, his 16th birthday.
The Germans marched into Poland, and we were all listening to the radio. There was no television down at the dock. That's when I first heard of the war. So from that time, everything changed. Probably didn't know it then, but it was inevitable that we were going to have to go. Well, in November of '42, Army recruiters came to school and I enlisted. I didn't discuss it with my parents that I can remember. I may have called them up and said, the recruiter's here, that business. After all, my father had been a soldier. My uncle had been killed in World War I. So I enlisted, and I didn't want to be drafted. If drafted, you didn't know what's going to happen to you. I figured it was a stigma. I didn't want to be called a slacker, or sometimes that people were branding individuals that, here I'm only, 1942, I'm 19. Everybody, these people are being drafted, and I'm in school. So it was just I was patriotic. And I did my basic training there in Camp Callan, which was just a little bit north of San Diego. We were very close, especially Battery C, where we were. We weren't so hot on parade grounds, things like that, but we would win more firing contests, things like that. We had a very athletic battery. The physical part was tough. You did a lot of what they do now, running, climbing, various firing practices where you crawl under fire. And one of the things, You go in the Army in basic training, and you're taught to kill. That's the first thing. The idea is you're going to take a life. If you can't do that, well, then you don't belong in the Army. There was a line in the movie Patton as something like, you're not there to die for your country. You're here to make that other son of a bitch die for his country. So that's the way it is. You're taught to shoot. You're taught to kill. So if you can't do that, and there were guys that couldn't do that.
You try not to think about somebody taking lives, but he must have had to because somebody was trying to take his.
In October of 1944, he traveled to Manchester, England, where he remained until December. After this, he moved on to continental Europe.
Got on a Navy LSD. We went up, landed in Rouen, France. From there, we went to, first day was Soissons. That's where first day in France, and first day we were fired on. Strafed. They must have known we were coming. When you're first fired on, you have a sensation of anger. At least I did. What the hell are they? What the hell are they doing? There's somebody shooting at me. So your instinct is to react and fire back. When somebody's trying to kill you, you have to respond in kind. It's not a world of doves. Then we went on, I think, with the Bastogne-Arlon highway. The larger picture with the guns and the snow was taken in Bastogne, Belgium in January 1945. This was near the end of the Battle of the Bulge.
On December 16th, 1944, Axis forces attacked Bastogne to begin a month-long struggle that would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. Winston Churchill has said that the Bulge was undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war.
Well, that's the way everybody felt. You know, they weren't giving up. They were. After all, we were the best army in the world. We had all the resources. You were trained to stay in there, and there was no lack of heroism. There's guys that literally gave their lives to save the city, and I think it was a spot where it proved that the American soldier was capable of almost anything. But under the conditions were bitter. Men with frostbite, well, I can remember sleeping with my rifle, actually sleeping with it, because you put it under your coat, otherwise it wouldn't fire, it would freeze. I just think that's one reason why I'm cold now. I never got over it.
I remember talking with him after. He said, yeah, it's very true. You'd be in a foxhole and the guy next to you, you turn around and turn back, and all of a sudden his head's blown off. So that's where you start to really get a feeling that's what he went through and the experiences. And how lucky we all were that he came out of it.
Following the end of the Bulge in January of 1945, my grandfather moved through Luxembourg and into Nazi Germany toward the city of Weimar.
Also, it was the home of Buchenwald, which was a death camp for mostly Jews, and that was never want to see anything like that again. That was well, it's better off I don't say anything. You just wonder how people can treat each other or treat someone like they were treated. Lampshades made out of human skin, that sort of thing. Just some of them barely living, others misshapen.
He had told me, you know, when he went into one of the camps, that the smell is what he remembers first, and that there was a man who was walking like a crab because his legs had been broken and he was kind of dragging them along and using his arms, but he came up and he grabbed a hold of my dad's leg and just kept saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you."
The Nazis fled so quickly that they didn't even, the train cars were all there, loaded with dead bodies, and the snow had fallen on these dead bodies, and that's one of the things that Grandpa saw. So, I mean, no wonder he didn't speak about it.
Big ditches filled with bodies, and in the crematorium, you could see the hooks where they were hung up like in a butcher shop. The pigs had better accommodation than the prisoners had.
It was just a terrifying thing, and just I can't imagine what it must have been like for them to walk into that and try to assist or to do whatever they had to do as they were liberating it.
A smaller picture was taken 51 years ago today, after the war in Europe was over. We expected to be sent to Japan, but luckily for me, that didn't happen. Well, in the coming home, I left from Marseille in southern France, and Marseille, or the Mediterranean, was so rough. But then when we got through out into the ocean, it was like glass all the way home. And when we got to New York, saw the Statue of Liberty, and I cried. It's quite a sight for sore eyes.
And then as I got older, it was a sense of pride for me to say, my dad's a World War II vet, and I think people have a different sense of respect when they hear that about him.
But then the most direct story with Grandpa was that when they first came to France, they came in Le Havre, the harbor, just after D-Day. They came a little bit farther west on the coast. And the first city that they came to was Rouen, R-O-E-U-N. And that's where I was playing a concert there. I just thought, if I say something, they're going to either chase me off the stage or maybe it'll go well. So I told him that, my father was part of the Army, and it was an honor for me to be there, and always loved French music, and that we were the only two Americans invited to play there, and that I hope that it's part of the efforts that my father gave, and that our shared love of music means something for them. And they, especially the older people in the audience, started clapping and stood up just because I said that Dad was part of the war, and they started clapping, and it was one of those things where you think, okay, it'll last just a couple seconds, and then I went back to start playing, and they stood there applauding and kept applauding, till it was almost uncomfortable. I almost lost it because they wouldn't sit down. Okay, that's enough.
It's just really, thankful that he came through, that we're here, that we're all here.
I found so many times is that Americans, even though we had Pearl Harbor and we had 9/11, there's nothing like the experience that the Europeans have of constantly, year after year, century after century, being under attack and having massive numbers of casualties and massive number of people directly affected by it, and we just have no understanding of it. And then that's why the people stood and applauded for, the son of somebody who went through there 50 years ago.
War is hell. Really, it's no place for humanity, because you do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do. It's an experience. You never forget. I wouldn't want my children to go through it, but I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Graham, remember that Grandpa Lyman was much younger when these pictures were taken, but I can assure you that I am the Army man. Much love, Grandpa Lyman.